Hi, all. I'm Tim Adams from Athletics Weekly. And after the amazing World Athletics Championships in Oregon, one of the biggest standout performances, no doubt, was Jake Whiteman winning the 1500 meter gold medal, battling Jakob Ingebrigtsen down that final straight. So, who better to talk to in an exclusive Q&A with AW than Jake's dad, his coach, but obviously you will know him as the infield stadium announcer at Hayward Field. But also, Jeff, I think sometimes people forget you were actually a marathon athlete back in the day as well. Eighth place in the Commonwealth Marathon.
Oh God! I mean, before
1990.
most people were born, Tim, I had a couple of championship marathons. But yeah, there are some colour pictures, but most of them are in black and white.
Great. Right. So we've been given quite a few questions. And as I've said to you before the recording, actually, you received more than Michael Johnson, Paula Radcliffe, and Crammy on some of the ones that we've had previously. So take that for you. Before I read the questions out, the first one from me, really. When you're seeing Jake and Jakob down that final straight, what are your feelings? Because you commentated on Jake, from English schools to World Championships, but then suddenly the prospect of a World Championship gold medal against the guy who was always seen as impenetrable, really, that must have been a thrilling feeling to have.
Yeah, we talked about the tactics. The only chink in the armour of Jakob Ingebrigtsen really is his 800-metre leg speed. If it was an 800-metre race with his 146 or whatever it is on current season's form, he wouldn't be the quickest in the field. So the only chance you've got, and he doesn't allow it to go slow in the countdown to the final 200 metres, is to pounce in the last 30 seconds of the race. And getting by him is not easy. He usually runs that tactic like Centrovitz did in Rio, where he just holds the inside curve. Mo did it as well to great success over a number of years, just making people go wide, especially around the bends, and just taking the sting out of kicks. So, yeah, that was the tactic. But we've seen him come back in situations like that. He's no slouch. He's got wheels. So it was nerve-wracking.
And I guess when Jake crosses the line, you think to yourself, wow, personally, it's an amazing moment, but professionally, you've got to put that affront of the personal stuff for that specific moment.
Yeah, I try and keep it as objective as I can. I'm not announcing for Jake. I'm announcing for the whole field, for everybody that's in the stands, and that will include coaches, family and friends, and they don't want to hear a biased commentary. So I try and make it as neutral as I can, but you've got to be aware of who the medalists are. The time at one stage, I was conscious with, all the way around the last lap, that Mo's British record could have been under threat, and it was within, I don't know, 2/3 of a second of that. So I was keeping an eye on the time as well. And if you sort of busy yourself on those things, you don't have a chance to get too emotional or partisan.
And I guess final one from me would be, now reflecting on that championships and the reception that Jake got back when he was, opening the champagne, the picture of him and Laura at the airport. Those memories are going to stay for you guys for life. So when do those pictures end up on the Whiteman mantelpiece? I think one of our most popular posts at AW wasn't anything to do with the actual action. It was the picture of all you three with Susan as well. And it was not keeping up the Kardashians, but keeping up with the Whitemans. It's the preferable one.
Yeah, I suppose in all of this, and this is where I get to be a bit Victor Meldrew about it and a bit coachy about it. It's not like an obituary or a reflection on his career. He's got Commonwealth Games this week. He may have European Championships 2 or 3 weeks after that. So hopefully there's plenty of chapters still to be written in his career. He's just turned 28. So I don't want it all to be too backward looking, because he's in good form and he should try and make the most of that. But it was a very, very special day for our family. I picked up a print of Hayward Field. Pierce O'Callaghan printed out some duplicates of his race bib, and those are the things you'll hang on to. But mostly it's the memory. It's the memory of how that all unfolded and that we could share it.
Well, I know the video afterwards when, which is of you seeing Jake for the first time and you were hugging each other. The first thing you said was Commonwealth Games. So that's not hard to work out. Okay. First question then, and I guess this kind of follows up from what I've just said, but how does winning the World Championship change in any way your approach and plans to the future? And what do you think the psychological impact will be short and long term?
So I think he's had a real high, obviously, in the last couple of weeks with the amount of media attention and inevitably that sort of creates some sort of peak in your life and a peak in your season. But I think if you're world champion, you'll be expected to win most races that you do. But there will be times when he'll line up out of season in cross countries, indoor races, where he won't actually be in 10 out of 10 form. And he's just going to have to take that on the chin because our expectations and other people's expectations might not be quite aligned. He's in peak form right now, but you can only maintain that for 6 weeks in a year. And the rest of the time, I guess you're vulnerable to losing. But we do have to look at the fact that he will be expected to win most races that he lines up for. And that's great because we've always hoped to win most races that he's lined up for.
And of course, Commonwealths and Europeans and cross country in the winter. I don't know what you've got planned for him there, but that'll be interesting. Okay, second question. How was Jake like when you met him after the event? Getting to know a bit about the conversation would be nice. I mean, I touched on the Commonwealth Games remark that you had. Was that about it, or?
So I got questioned right up in the Crow's Nest where I was speaking by a group of the British broadsheet journalists. So I gave them a bit of time, by which time Jake was into his whole mixed zone journey. So I had to get to him creeping underneath the calves of the Americans who were giving an interview, or was it the 400-meter hurdlers who were giving interviews? And then he was mid-interview. So it was just a quick hug and well done and great tactics. And then now Commonwealths. And he didn't like that because it's like, he needed to have that night to enjoy it. He was traveling home the next day, and that was a bit mean-spirited of me, really. But it is part of that. Yeah, it's 1 out of 3 done for this year, and I think he's round to that point of view himself as well now.
Yeah, 100%. Third question. This is a very good question, actually. Somebody who knows you well. How much longer do you think you can cling on to the last family Whiteman record, 5,000 meters? So I guess you could explain a bit more about that record. And is Jake, obviously Jakob, ironically, then won gold in the 5.
Yeah. So, and I'm not sure anybody else could have done that. I mean, he did that in the European Championships. He won the 1500 in extremely exciting circumstances and then came back the next night after his medal ceremony and all the media to win the 5,000. So he's pretty unique in the way that he can put back-to-back distances together like that. So my family record is 13:42. And it was set in Germany in a race that Jack Buckner won in 1988. And I actually had to borrow some spikes off Glenn Grant because it was an early morning start and I'd packed 2 left shoes and only realised when I was down at trackside and Glenn was warming down and I got them. Jake could probably run 13:42 right now. A 5,000 on the track is probably 2 or 3 years away. His personal best goes back to school. So his personal best at 5,000 is about 15:30.
At school, wow, that's
yeah. But he hasn't run one, and similarly with 3,000, his personal best was very dated until he turned his attention to it properly last winter and has brought it down to 7:37. So it's on borrowed time, and I don't mind that. I mean, my times were pedestrian, really. Well, marathon, yeah. Let's see you at 2:13, Jake. That may be one to think about.
I think if Jake broke 2:13, he'd probably take that over a gold medal at an Olympic Games. To be honest, it'd be that audacious. Okay, next question: is there a particular 1500 meters specific session that you give to Jake each year to see where his fitness is at? If so, what session would that be? I know you did a lot of cross country strength work over the winter. When did you kind of start getting up to the 1500 meters specifically from that?
Well, he started one. He had a DNF in the Muller Indoor Grand Prix in Birmingham with COVID. Unfortunately, he'd had it 10 days before. But I try and mix my sessions up so that I coach 4 athletes and they're not always making comparisons unless it's what I'm trying to achieve. So the standard session where if they're ready, I would encourage them to do it just to know exactly where they are. And it's not specific to us, it's 400s. So either 8, 10 or 12 400s with a lap jog. And in fact, he's doing a cut down version of that, Jake, on Saturday, possibly with a bike pacer. And only because we're within 2 weeks of the Commonwealth Games, within 10 days of it. Salazar who's not, the most creditable coach these days, but one bit of advice he gave in a seminar was don't set personal best sessions in training within 2 weeks of a championship. I think he had a bad experience where a lot of his athletes were absolutely flying ahead of a World Indoors in the Far East, and they all ran badly. And his view was they left it in those final sessions. So from here on in, they're not sessions to set the world alight. They're just to keep you ticking over. But that's the one, quarters with a lap jog.
Similar mindset, actually, to, when people talk about tournaments, and it'd be interesting to see how England, the Lionesses, get on in the final, whether they peaked against Sweden in the semi-final with that 4-0 win. It's kind of that same mindset. You want to be right at that specific moment. Okay, this is a great one. Jerusalem, Eugene, Birmingham. I'm aware you'll probably be in Munich as well, so that applies to this question. All in a couple of weeks. How's the jet lag?
Yeah, well, I went from Jerusalem to Colorado Springs in a day. So in the space of a day, I actually traveled for 28 hours. And that's the one where Jake posted a picture of me for his Saturday night training session, asleep on the pole vault bed.
Yes.
I just rested my eyes and I'd gone. So I'm not too bad with jet lag. I mean, I got back yesterday. I've had 5 hours sleep each of the last 3 nights, but I can nap my way back to the proper sleep routine. So, yes, thank you. I won't, subject to selection at the end of this week, Jake's after 800 meter selection. So I've not slated anything in for Munich, and I'm not announcing there. In Eastern Europe and in Germany, they tend to have German announcers who do the English as well. So I'm definitely not involved in that, but I was involved in those 3, and it's been a fair bit of travel.
Well, at least you didn't have Colombia as well, because that would have been an interesting one for the under-20s. So this is a question from Scottish Athletics, actually, in their Twitter that you might have seen earlier on. Do you envisage Jake racing cross-country in Scotland again next season? Short course event over 4K like in November last year.
Well, yeah, which was a disaster for him. He was 14th in the Scottish. It was biblically bad weather in Lanark. And with Jake's stride, we've worked hard on his sprint foot placement and things like that. And in mud, he just rocks back onto his heels, and it's not the best. On a firm grass track, you've got half a chance. But so the way the season will go for him will be probably something like Fifth Avenue Mile mid-September, then a break of 2 to 3 weeks, then slowly building back fitness, and then off to Flagstaff middle of November to middle of December. So there's a window in there which could include Scottish 4K, could include running for Edinburgh in the Scottish cross-country relays, could include a run second claim for my old club, Dartford Harriers, in the Kent League. But it just depends. It's prime season for colds. It's prime season for picking up tweaks and twangs. And we'll have to see. Ideally, yes, because I love those events. He loves to do stuff for his club. I'll pencil it in, but we'll just have to sort of review it as we go.
Yeah, I mean, cross-country is brutal. And from anyone who's experienced cross-country in Scotland, that's brutal with a capital B, I think. That's for certain. Question from my mum actually sent this across. And to be honest, I wouldn't normally just include it because it's my mum, but to be fair to her, it's actually a damn good question. What is more exciting, to win a race yourself or watching Jake win?
I'm so far past racing that I've almost forgotten that feeling. And I didn't really have anything comparable. I had a couple of British vests. And I think also everybody wants the best for their kids, whether that's careers, happiness, health, sporting endeavour. So it's a good question, but I think I'd prefer to sit back and see our children progress and take pleasure in their achievements. And it's not just Jake and his running. Sam and Martha are interested respectively in theatre and drama and politics. They're not interested in which we can get as involved as we do with Jake, but you still want to support them and ensure they have an enjoyable working life.
Well, I've seen a few family photos on social media over the past few days. I think your family, talking about the Kardashians, is kind of getting up to that level now with the virality of the content, I guess is the best way to put it. So what's the support team like around Jake? How big is it and who does what? Obviously, you're the dad and the coach, but how big is the team and how broad is it?
So we had a Zoom call back in May, just before the season really kicked off. And that's the first time everybody's come together on a call. So it was me. It was Laura Turner-Allain, who's his sprint and drills coach. It's Andy Kay, who's his strength and conditioning coach. It's Andy Shaw. They're not all called Andy, but there's a fair number called Andy. Andy Shaw, who's his physiologist. Alex O'Gorman, who's his physiotherapist, and me and Jake. Beyond that, you can include his agent, Mark Wetmore. There's others that get involved in different elements of it. His training partners, for example, including Tom Keane, who trained with him in Colorado Springs and did a great job. So it is like an F1 team, really. I'm just a sort of Captain Mannering figure, just shouting my mouth off in the background. But there is other people there that I've mentioned that have got brilliant skills, and they've made a huge difference to Jake over the last few years.
I was about to say you're essentially the Toto Wolff, but theoretically in Hayward Field, you're more like Bono, actually, given you're on the audio.
It's just noise.
Multitasking, Jeff, there, I think.
Yeah, but the common thread is it's just background noise, whether it's on the PA system or coaching, it's just wow, 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 wow.
So, penultimate question then. Jake's gold medal aside, what was your personal highlight from A, British, and B, a global perspective from Eugene? Because it was, on the surface, a spectacular World Championships, the 18th edition, the first ever in America. People think about Helsinki 83 being, the inaugural one is always one of the best. Obviously, there's the relationship between Jake and Crammy and the golds there. But I guess what the highlights for you outside of Jake? So
I wasn't in the stadium for every session. We had 3 announcers rotating. But the performances that I think I remember and which I thought were admirable, Amy Pratt in the women's steeplechase from a British perspective, breaking the British record twice, once in the qualifying and then again in the final, and beating Emma Coburn on the run-in. You can't do more than that. I mean, that's an incredible achievement for somebody relatively new on the scene, and I hope she takes that and moves on to new levels. Globally, I like Mondo. I mean, Mondo is almost like he is our banker as a sport, isn't he? To do great things on the last day and keep everybody late and set the seal on the whole championships. But Sydney McLaughlin, I mean, you look at that time in the same way as we looked at Varholm, and you think, really, that's a brilliant flat time, and they've gone over 10 flights of hurdles. So, yeah, I think McLaughlin and Mondo and Amy Pratt, they're my memories of Eugene.
Well, I was at an after party in Stockholm with Mondo, and I can safe to say he's as good kind of in a party than he is in the pole vault. That's for certain. And certainly, I don't know if Bob Beamon was in the stadium with McLaughlin, but I think that world record in the hurdles could stand for a generation, to be honest, because that's, I think, was it 2 seconds almost? Just
although, I mean, she could go quick. She may go quicker. That's the thing. It's like Varholm, it's out of reach for most ordinary people, but for her, she's still very young, so you never know.
Cool. Right, final question, Jeff. Very, very good way to end it, actually. You've personally seen the Coe-Cram Ovett era, and I think with middle distance running, it's safe to say we're getting into a stage, with Jake and Josh and the other Jake and Jake Hayward, and obviously with Max Burgin and Cole Langford, Dan Rowden, then on the women's side, Laura and Keely. The list is endless. How do the two eras compare? Certainly in terms of, I think the question says competitiveness, but actually getting the sport to the next level in terms of what it is, into the health of it, I guess, is the best way of putting it.
So I was proud to have lived through the Cram Coe-Ovett era. And don't forget, there was Peter Elliott and Graham Williamson and John Robson and people like that, Frank Clement on the scene at that time as well. And I think it is those rivalries that people tune into. Ultimately, we are a sport of head-to-head contests, but the public knew them. Seb was doing Horlicks commercials, Steve Ovett was doing vacuum cleaner commercials. They were on prime time on ITV and BBC. And I think once you start projecting the sport in that way, people do start identifying with characters. One of Seb's record attempts interrupted the 9 o'clock news to show the race live. We're a little bit away from that at the moment. We've slipped down the radar. Football is far more dominant than it was in the 80s. Football in those days was just a Sunday afternoon recorded highlights viewing on the big match or recorded highlights on Match of the Day. Athletics has some great stories to tell. It's still got a few things to sort out, especially beneath the elite championship level. I don't think the Diamond League actually is as understandable as Eugene was for people watching. They understand national colours, heats, finals, medals, disqualifications, and all of that kind of thing. But you take it to the next level down, and what does the Diamond League mean? What's at stake? Why is it meaningful? Why should they watch? So I think we've got issues to address around that. But athletics is still the best sport. You and I don't need to be persuaded of that. But we've got to sort of work the way up the agenda again, have more correspondents that are covering it exclusively, more meaningful year-round competition. And some of the things that Ailish mentioned in her recent article, just to engage them.
Yeah.